last year I did about 90,000 in just Etsy alone. And when I saw that it was going to do really well and it was consistent, then of course I built my own website so I could have another way for people to find me. So Etsy brings a lot of traffic to whatever it is you're selling. And that's super attractive because if you're doing your own website with your own domain, it's up to you to bring in all the traffic, and you're also competing with everything else out there, and that can be really hard. But I love the idea of taking something, giving it a purpose, giving it a story, and selling it.
Hello, and welcome to our channel. We have a very exciting episode today, especially for people who already have or are thinking about starting their own online store. We have Dana Laymon joining us today. She has a very successful Etsy store as well as her own e-commerce website. So stick around, we'll be right back. Welcome back. We have Dana joining us from North Carolina. Dana, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm good. I hope you are.
Okay, excellent. Very excited to have you. I know it's a very interesting topic that we're going to be talking about, and a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of this as well. So let's get started by going back a little bit. You went to business school. You had a corporate job. You followed that usual path that people go to school, get a job, but you always knew that this may not be exactly what you wanted to do, right? So tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I think coming from a traditional minded family, it was just expected that we would go to college. My sister was brave enough to take a different route and go to fashion design school. And so she's younger than me. I had already enrolled and was in business school for college. And so she inspired me a little bit to be like, there's another option out there. And we were both actually very creative minded. I feel like I was more right brain and left brain. And so I was constantly being pulled in two different directions. And, mentally I was like, well, business school is not a bad idea in case I need it. And so I went ahead and did that in North Carolina by the beach. So I had to make it a little bit fun and still had a passion for photography and entrepreneurship. And while I was not in business classes, I did whatever I could to take creative classes, especially photography. And so I actually spent a summer in New York at summer school doing photography at Parsons, where my sister was in New York. And it kind of lit a spark inside of me. And after that, when I came back, I reached out to a couple wedding photographers, wedding videographers, just people who were actually making a living with their creative passion. And I ended up interning for a wedding videographer, and it blew my mind because she was showing me that I can do this really fun, cool, creative thing for a living. And then seeing her do it as a single mom was really inspiring, because you always have the thought of, what if this doesn't work out? You just think you need to work really hard and make lots of money to just get by. But she was able to show me that you work hard and you charge what you need to charge and you can make it work. And so it was really cool to have that modeled for me, because I think a lot of people don't know what's out there and what's possible unless somebody in their life is modeling it for them. And so after that, I was really torn as to what I was going to do after I got out of school. Right after I got out of school, I ended up getting married, and, we had dreams of buying a house and one day having a family. And so there was then that added pressure of really needing a stable paycheck. So I did go into the corporate life for a little while, but still had this creative bug that I knew I needed to fill. So started shooting weddings and doing anything I could photography wise on the side. And as it grew and grew and I got more experience, I was like, yep, this is what I want to do. I want to get out of the corporate world. And the corporate world ended up being great because I worked for a really big company. And so I was able to make a lot of connections. And I learned a lot. I learned how, if I was going to be a manager and have people working for me, how I wanted that to look and how I wanted to be treated as an employee. So I slowly built my photography business up on the side as I was, working a full-time job. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great way to do it because there's less pressure. You learn a lot. You're forced to grow a little bit slower because you don't have all the time in the world to focus on one thing. And so I slowly built that up and then transitioned from the corporate world into wedding photography. So I did that for about, 10, 12 years. And along that way, during that time, I added on boudoir photography. It was just more of a passion of mine. And since I was more of an introvert, I couldn't sustain the weddings very long. Like it was very grueling to me, very stressful. And my body was just like starting to give out because it is a lot of work. It's really hard. So I made the decision to try and do something that would fit my lifestyle, my personality more, which was more of one-on-one photography. So I ventured into just doing boudoir and transitioned over to doing that, which was great because I had the clientele there already from wedding photography and a network there that I could draw from. And then the pandemic hit and all photography and all weddings basically stopped, which still affected my business because a lot of my clients were brides. And during that time, as being a serial entrepreneur, I couldn't not do anything. Like I still had the drive to want to make money and figure out something I could do during that downtime. And so I started just shooting anything I could. My daughter, our house, we live on some land, or would shoot nature. We are at the beach. I would shoot the beach. And then I was like, flatlays are really important and have always been a part of my photography career. And I even wanted to pull that into my boudoir career because I can only show so many naked people. It wasn't really in my nature to show a lot of my clients. I like to keep that private, but I still wanted to show other aspects of what I do without showing everything. So behind the scenes, more of me, what my studio looks like, and then also flatlays. So lingerie, perfume, garters, all those fun little details. And then I realized that during that time, people were also struggling with flatlays themselves. I noticed there wasn't a lot of education out there for it, especially for wedding photographers. You're so focused on shooting the other details of the wedding and your client, and that sort of gets put by the wayside. And it was coming on strong, especially with Pinterest. Brides were getting more interested in it and more educated about it. So I decided, because I also have a love for antiquing and thrifting, and it was an excuse to go shopping, that I would start putting some things together that I thought other photographers and people in my situation would help them. So I had a few things laying around and I was like, well, let me see if I can just put these up on Etsy and see if they'll sell. Like I love a good, I don't want to say flip, but I love the idea of like taking something, giving it a purpose, giving it a story and selling it. So even like on Facebook Marketplace, if I see a beautiful piece of furniture that's for a really good price, but it's not photographed well, and they're not doing it justice by giving it a story, like staging it almost to show people what it could be like. I love buying pieces like that, making it look better, telling a story with it, showing people how it could really look in their home and then sell it. So it's kind of doing the same thing. So just finding antique pieces, really good deals that I thought would work really well in Flatlays. And I started the Etsy shop in January of last year. And really, it took off very quickly. I was surprised. So I started out small. I was like, let me just put a couple things up there. and photograph it really well and tell people and show people how they can use it. And within the first week and a half, I made a sale, and then I sold out of like all 4 things that I had up there. And so I just kept adding more. And if I could find the same thing, I would put it back up there because I knew somebody obviously liked it and wanted it and knew that it would sell. And it's sort of like a rinse and repeat process when you find something that works. So here I am a year and a half later. I have stopped shooting photography because it was getting to the point where I had to do one or the other. Both were getting very busy. So I made the decision to put photography on the back burner for right now and focus on the Etsy store. And we did last year, I did about 90,000 in just Etsy alone. And when I saw that it was going to do really well and it was consistent, then of course I built my own website so I could have another way for people to find me. So I started making sales that way. And then this year, we're probably going to do at least 120 through Etsy. And I love it. I think it's an awesome way to either have a side hustle or make some money and get started without having to build your own complete expensive website. So yeah, I'm super excited. You never know like where things are going to take you. You can just sort of try them and play around and see what works and listen to feedback from what other people are telling you and just keep like following those little breadcrumbs and do what makes you happy. So yeah, here we are today and I'm packing up orders all day every day.
So I have some specific questions, obviously, and wanted to get started with those. Um, why did you choose Etsy to begin with among the other platforms?
That's a good question. I'm an avid podcast and YouTube listener.
Mm.
And so I knew about Shopify and other e-commerce sites, but I was pretty familiar with Etsy already. I had an Etsy shop way back in the day when it kind of first started, and it was actually along the same lines. I was finding cool little like home decor pieces that I could buy and sell on Etsy for a profit that were easy to ship. And so I was familiar with it. I also liked that it was an inexpensive way to kind of test your idea. So Etsy brings a lot of traffic to whatever it is you're selling. And that's super attractive because if you're doing your own website with your own domain, it's up to you to bring in all the traffic and you're also competing with everything else out there. And that can be really hard. So Etsy does a lot of that work for you, which I love. And if you can take beautiful pictures and use your keywords strategically, they do amazing at getting your product out there to a really big audience. And it's a great way. There's no pressure to list a couple things and see how it goes. And then you can list a couple more. You can list different things. You can list different colors. If they're not selling, there's no limit to like the testing you can do on there. It's 20 cents to list an item. And then they take a small percentage of um, when you actually sell the item. And so you just take that into account when you're pricing your item. They handle the shipping. Like everything is super streamlined and smooth, and they make it easy to use. And it's a great community. Like if you have a question about anything, there's like an Etsy forum and community and a whole lot of help if you're a seller on Etsy. And so it's just a great way if you're not kind of sure what you want to sell or if it's going to do well to just test out your idea.
Okay, perfect. And in terms of branding, initially when you started, as you said, strategic use of keywords and things like that to get found, obviously. But in terms of branding, like, do you think that your store initially, when you started, did you try to, create a brand because you come from the creative side of things as well?
Yeah, I still feel like that's really important. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, but I've heard some people say, like, you can figure that part out later. But I do think because you're on Etsy, there is a lot of competition there, and you do want to try and stand out. I don't think it's difficult or needs to be expensive to be able to do that and just start creating a brand for yourself. I, of course, am big on photography and having good imagery, making sure things look good. And I also believe that you are your brand. So I want to make sure I have a great photograph of myself. I fill out all the description fields that are on there, give lots of information, tell them who I am, what my store is about, and try and make it look cohesive as possible. So if I want to be a light, bright, airy, beautiful store, that I want to make sure everything from the logo to the header picture to my picture goes well together to represent that. If you want to be like dark, moody, and edgy, then you need to make sure everything is kind of in that realm as well. And that's what's going to keep, you know, your first impression going of that brand. And then it's also how you interact with your customers. So I get messages every day, and it's how you talk to them, you know, how quickly you respond to them, and then they get a feel of who you are at that point too. And I think that's also really important to have that good customer service and that be a part of your brand. And it's not expensive to get a logo. You know, people, I feel like, stress over their colors and their logo, and just know that that can always change down the road. If you want to get a free or cheap logo to start, just making sure that everything you're doing in that realm is consistent at the time. And then if you ever want to change or upgrade later, you certainly can. But I do think the imagery and the pictures play a big role in that. Yeah. And since, you know, I've started a few businesses along the way, I think branding's always been super important. I've just not stressed about it as much as I start new business. I know that it's just not about the logo, you know, it's about me as the brand as well and my voice behind the business.
Mhm.
So I've learned to not put so much effort and energy and stress about it, but I do think it's important.
Okay. All right. In terms of the items, tell us or give us a kind of like a broad level understanding of the items that you're selling right now on Etsy and on your website. Like, are they all the same, or are there only specific items that you've targeted only for Etsy? Just give us a breakdown of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So for people who are not familiar with what flatlays are, they're basically images that you're shooting from above. So your object, let's say your wedding invitation, is laying flat on the ground. And as the photographer, you're shooting it from up above, shooting down. So it'd be like flat, but it's become sort of a competitive thing and thing that brides expect their photographer to do as a part of their wedding is shoot the invitation, their bouquet, their shoes, their bridal details. And it's not almost enough these days to just put just the shoes on the ground and shoot them. Like it needs to be a really beautiful image. So I basically provide the accessories or the props for the photographers to be able to create those beautiful images. So I started out with little simple things that, like, the necessary things I knew people would need. So ring boxes. That's one way to create a really big impact. And it's something that brides need because sometimes they're given these kind of ugly leather black boxes with the company's name on them or on the inside, and they don't do a lot for pretty images. So I started out with some velvet ring boxes. I had little antique trays that I had collected over time and put those up there. So I really started with the key pieces. And then from there, once I kind of figured out those were working and people liked them, I would start adding other items. And I also quickly learned that I needed it to be items that I could easily get multiple of, because also the process of taking pictures of an item and listing it and selling it, if it's a new item each time, is really time consuming. So if I could have 10 of something and sell 10 of them and just be able to put in my inventory on Etsy that I have 10, then it would just continually stay active and live for people to buy. Whereas if I found an antique ring dish and I would list that, I would have to do that process of taking pictures of it and listing it every single time because it was a unique piece. I learned, if I wanted to keep myself from going crazy, that I needed a mix of those new and old things in there. And like I said, I love to antique and thrift. So I continue to find unique, one of a kind pieces because I think that's really important. I think people want those. They don't want the same thing that everybody else is using. And then I also want to have those basic staples that I think photographers need to have in their images. So it can be little white trinket dishes, like a gold dish, little wooden bowls, some pretty cheesecloth that they can use. And then along the way, I also noticed people were using styling mats more and more, which is basically your background for those images. And my sister, being in fashion design, luckily knows how to sew really well. And so I had bought a couple along my photography journey and didn't understand why they were so expensive. And I was seeing all these companies, not, all these new companies out there, and they were making beautiful products and they were great companies, but it was a piece of fabric and they were really expensive. And then you, as a photographer, would want multiple of them because you would want different colors and different textures for backgrounds. And so her and I collaborated on making our own styling mats. And so then we eventually added those to the store because I feel like I could do it at a lower price point, especially since we're making them in-house. And so I go out and source the material and we collaborate on what we think would work for that. And so we added those at the end of last year, and those have done really well. It's definitely a different process because I'm creating them from start to finish. But that's been really fun to kind of have my own unique product in there. And as far as like now, I do have a Shopify site. Um, I try and have the site it's so much easier to me to keep up with Etsy, and I get most of my traffic there. So there's more incentive for me to keep that updated and clean and streamlined. And so most of what I have is also on my own website. It just might not be quite as updated as Etsy. I wish it was a little more user friendly. I feel like people love Shopify, but I don't know. I'm just having a hard time with it here and there.
Okay. And you were doing, and you're still doing very well on Etsy. Why did you feel the need to have your own site?
It's just another way to gain traffic
Mhm,
and to build up your brand, another
mhm.
way to be found. And I also try and direct people to my own site because it is more cost effective. So Etsy does take a cut, whereas Shopify, not so much. So there is a little bit more profit to be made. And I do think it's just important to have like your own landing page if you get to the point where you're serious about something, and people can sign up for my newsletter there. I can share more information there. I have a blog there. So it does a lot more for you than Etsy because it is just like shop and check out on Etsy, whereas you can really get to know me and watch videos, and I can link to anything on my own site. And like I said, I have a blog where I can do tutorials for people. And so I like having that, as a part of my brand as well.
Okay. So, speaking of building up the brand, and this is going to be sort of an extension to what we talked about before, was it what other things should people do in order to build up that brand? Instagram is like a no-brainer. Obviously, you have to have that. What else? You got your newsletter, right? Uh, I'm sure you have an email list and all that. What else are you doing?
So, me personally, I started a podcast. It's just a business podcast where I'm interviewing other entrepreneurs just like this. And then I do have an episode actually just on Etsy coming up. So, if there's anything that I can share with other people who are wanting to try out Etsy or start their own business, I love talking to other people about their businesses. I'm not tied to this Etsy or this e commerce shop that I've started. I just love helping people either start their business or help them through their journey. And so I just naturally thought the podcast was the next thing for me to do. So having your own website, definitely Instagram. And I just say the social media channels that resonate with you, like not to be on everything. And if Instagram's not for you, then that's fine. So it's figuring out what works for you and running with it. So like for you, for instance, you love and do well on YouTube. That might not work for me. Video and working with YouTube is just not my favorite thing to do. And so I went the podcast route. So I think it's figuring out what resonates with you and just making sure you have different channels for people to find you. And really, it's all about serving. So as long as you're serving and giving and sharing information and teaching on those platforms, I think it's going to help you regardless of what platform you choose. But it is, important to make sure you have different ways for people to be able to find you, even if it's LinkedIn, because in some places LinkedIn is used more than here in the US. And so that may fit better for you and your brand. So it really just depends.
Okay, got it. So, in terms of sourcing the items, how are you mainly sourcing the items at the moment?
A lot of internet searching and a lot of antiquing.
Okay.
So for those who want to get into like a product-based business, there is a website online. I don't know how many of your listeners know, but so there's Alibaba online, and then there's AliExpress, where you can connect with Chinese manufacturers directly. And once I learned that, and then I learned the quantities of things that I was going to be needing and selling and how quickly, then that's the best way to get something the cheapest. If you're trying to get, your margin raised there for your product, it's also a way to get things created from scratch for you. So if you have an idea for something and you have to find it that you want to sell, you can also connect with manufacturers and they'll make you a sample that way. So just depending on what it is I'm looking for, and I feel like my shop is missing, but I also love antiquing and thrifting, even Facebook Marketplace, now that they are doing shipping on there, any little things I can have shipped. And I love just still going out and finding unique things, because I think that's what's going to make a Flatlay stand out. If I've ever been on Pinterest and I'm just like scroll stopped by a certain image, it's probably because there's something really unique about it.
Okay. So having dealt with a bit of Alibaba suppliers in the past, I know that, even someone who's like a novice, never been there, once they first go in there, they will see the quality of the supplier, because you see a lot of information, detailed information, whereas you may also come across suppliers with very little information given about their manufacturing facilities or their other terms and conditions, right? So, in terms of that, how do you go about generally evaluating these suppliers? Because in my own experience, I had to pay for samples which were sent out to me, and there's always, obviously, there's discount with bulk orders. That's a given. Like the more you order, the better per unit price you're gonna get, right? So how do you go about evaluating these suppliers? And in some cases, I've also found there is obviously a language barrier there too. So the thing is that, how have you navigated these kind of issues?
I would recommend trying AliExpress first to see if what it is you're looking for is already out. And regardless of whether you're looking on AliExpress or Alibaba, you really need to do your due diligence of looking at the ratings, reading all the information that's shared from the manufacturer, having a conversation with them if you're able to. And then just doing your own quality control. So if it already exists on AliExpress, let's say, I will order just one of whatever that item is. And unfortunately, other than what we're used to with Amazon, it does take a while to come in. So usually 3 weeks, sometimes, a month. But you need to order one of those to make sure it's up to your standards. And then working with on the manufacturing side, if you're creating something new, it really is the same thing. It's looking at their ratings, looking at their reviews, talking to them one-on-one, doing a lot of conversation, making sure they understand what your needs are, that you're on the same page with timelines, and just doing your due diligence. Like you said, it is annoying to have to pay for a sample and wait for it to come in, but it's better you do that than order 100 of them and it not be what you want. And I have had experiences where I've had a shipment of, say, 100 items and the quality was just not there compared to maybe what they've sent me before. And I've had a good experience where they've corrected it right away, sent me a new shipment, no questions asked, and they were able to correct it. And there is a language barrier there and a time difference. So it's just about being patient, making sure you're both on the same page. And so far my experience has been good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So if someone is looking to start a store, you had previous experience with Etsy, so this was your preferred platform. So how would you recommend people to evaluate these platforms if they have like zero experience?
A good way to do that is to talk to people who have used it. Graphic designers and web designers are also a good resource because they've usually worked with them on multiple occasions and in different ways and are more knowledgeable about them. So if you're looking at Squarespace versus Shopify versus Wix, or I don't even know, GoDaddy, what's still out there, it's just good to reach out to people who you can find who are using them and get their opinions and experience on it. And a lot of them do have free trials, like free 2-week trials, which is great. And I actually created another website. So my e-commerce is on Shopify. My new website is on Squarespace. And I thought Squarespace for designing a website was so much easier and took so much less time. And so that was really interesting to me. I wish that Shopify had been that easy just to create the website itself. And they do have e-commerce as well. And so it's just a matter of going out and testing them if you can and seeing what's going to work for you and their pricing. And then, what is their transaction fee if you're going to do e-commerce and that kind of thing. So there's different platform for each type of business you're going to have that's going to work the best. And so I think it's about doing, again, your due diligence and some research and figuring out what's going to work for you. And then, of course, if you are going to go the e-commerce route, to at least try Etsy. I actually knew another wedding vendor who was selling her own product. She was a wedding vendor, but also had created a product and wasn't on Etsy. And she wasn't selling very much at all on her own. And so I encouraged her to go on to Etsy because I knew her product would do great there. And she's done like 5 times as much on Etsy as she did before, kind of out on her own. So it you have to play around with it and decide. And she doesn't even I don't think she has her Shopify site anymore because it just wasn't serving her well.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much for all the information you have provided today. A lot of value there. So if people wanted to find your store on Etsy, what would they look for?
So if you go on Etsy, you can search the styling source and I'll pop up. I'm pretty sure if you also searched velvet ring box, I will pop up as well. Okay. So if you want to do that, you can also find me at thestylingsource.com and the Styling Source on Instagram, Facebook, wherever you search for people, I'm there.
Great. And all that will be in the description below. So if someone wants to check out the stores, all the information will be there. Thank you so much again for your time today. I really appreciate that. And I wish you all the best in growing your business and taking it to the next level.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. I'm glad we got to have this chat. Hopefully it'll help other people as well.
Thanks for watching. We really appreciate that. If you like what you saw, then give us a like. We'll be posting at least once every week going forward. So if you want to see similar kind of videos, then subscribe to the channel. And finally, if you want to see any kind of professional featured on a future episode, then let us know in the comment box below. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.